Good afternoon and welcome back to Dynamics 365 Finance and Operation. We are continuing to configure the human resource module and we will talk about the screening types in this video. So it is another crucial piece to configure, and of course, as I've been saying, the information that we configure in the system is coming from your client. So any type of screenings that we configure in the system, they should be coming directly from your HR manager and HR team that your client that you're working with your client. So in order to actually configure screening type, you go into human resources. Right underneath the setup, we go into screening types. So we talked about reason codes in the previous video, and then on the following ones, before the reason codes, of course, we've talked about employment types and categories and even human resources parameters. So all of that is actually applicable. And if you are stumbling upon this video the very first time, do go through those videos because it will help you understand the configuration pieces of human resource module. And there are some things that overlap with other modules, of course, which I've discussed, and then I've shared my experiences of my implementations that I've done so far within this space. So a lot of good information is there for you to leverage on, and there's some experiences, of course, that I have faced over the years that I have spent configuring the system. So let's go into screening types. And within the screening types form, you could see that there's already configured data here that we could utilize. To give you an example of a screening type, recently, a few years, or well, 2 years ago, COVID vaccination or COVID was introduced to the world. And for that, a screening type can be very applicable to an employee. And so from an organizational point of view, from an HR perspective, we couldn't have a screening type for COVID. And it's a very similar concept. As you could see, the medical screenings are here. I have seen other screening types, such as chickenpox, for instance. So there are organizations that still look for chickenpox type of screenings. I have also seen COVID, of course, that's the most recent one. So the way that it works is basically you create a new screening type, you give it a name, you give it a description, and then the frequency is however times you want it, basically from the drop-down menu. So it's a one-time only, daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly on the yearly basis. And once you, well, let me delete this. Once you actually select the frequency, you save it, then you would have this text box appear. And then in this case, we need to do a medical screening on 2 years basis. And the date is basically from the date is required. So when we actually select this medical screening or this screening type for an employee, you'll get to see in that form the valid date that is applicable to here. Unfortunately, there is no alert system in the within a built-in alert system where the system would prompt a user against an employee that 2 years have passed and this employee requires a medical screening to be completed. So that is a drawback to the medical screening type. However, if you have some reports, you can build some Power BI reports. It's not too difficult to do so. You can have these medical screenings pop up there on your dashboards. So the way you would assign a medical screening, just to not go into too much detail about the screening types, from a process perspective, you would go into human resources and employees. And if you were to select an employee, you can look for a screening type. So right underneath personal information, this is where screenings are. And if you click on screenings, you create a new screening, you would see a drop-down menu here, what kind of a screening type it is. So we see a medical one and required by. So this is simply for informational purposes. So when is this required by for this employee, and we can have it down in the future by 30th of April, for instance, this medical screening should be completed. The status is not complete as of yet, and you can put additional notes to it and simply save that. And as I mentioned, this form and this medical screening does not send you any form of alerts, and that is a drawback to the functionality. So let's see if Microsoft has actually come up with some sort of an alert that you could utilize for this. But some of my implementation, we actually custom built the alert, and there was a huge process against this. So that's why we needed to go through a technical design in order to fulfill that requirement. But another alternative that you can have is to create a custom alert if you like. So that is there. So this is something that we probably talk about at some point later. But a custom alert can be leveraged, and that is only user based. So you cannot assign that alert across the organization, across all employees. So from a end user perspective, they can create a custom alert for themselves. So with that, I think we've learned how you simply configure the screening types, what is the use of it, and what is applicable to the system itself. And with that, we will continue learning how to configure the human resources module in Dynamics 365. And I'll take you guys to the finish line, hopefully, and we'll get to the processes soon.